Hey guys, this is Jedi Kids here with a tutorial video on how to make your own Sith Acolyte mask. Now before I get started, I just want to apologize before, considering that the last tutorial video that I made was over a year ago. But I've been busy because I'm still taking classes at my community college and I don't have as much free time as I wish. With that, plus we have a whole bunch of other stuff that's going on, like our movie project for Star Wars Revan, and then we've got some other extracurricular school activities like a robotics team, so just throwing all that out there and help you be appreciative of the schedule that I wish I could do better. Anyway, so let's get started. The Sith Acolyte mask was based off of the game Star Wars The Old Republic. In the cinematic trailer, the first one that came out, there were a couple shots with the actual Sith Acolytes with their hoods, armor, lightsabers, and masks. And that got me thinking to try and do one of those kind of tutorials on myself, trying to make one of those kind of masks. So I did my own method. It's definitely, I think, an improvement from the clay, but the technique was a little bit more in-depth, so I guess it can vary on what type of style you like to make these masks on. Anyway, I got the inspiration to make the mask, and I started it off with trying to find out how was I going to make the shape. Well, I basically cut pieces of paper together and tried to make something look as best as I could. And yeah, that does look pretty simple, but that's what you would actually need to do. That's the hardest it would get. So once I did that, I went to Joann Fabrics to get one of those front part cranium masks that kind of look like Phantom of the Opera, so I could get that kind of dome shape, because making a dome out of paper is a lot harder than just making angle features and flat surfaces. So I got one of those, I put a layer of plastic over it, just plastic wrap would do, and I covered it with paper mache. So I've got the cardstock paper of the front part and the paper mache dome. I taped those two together and started adding my own layers of paper mache to cover the entire thing. I also added an extension because I realized that the mask was going to be a little bit too small to cover on just the head to like the midsection. So I added an extension there, and it started to look a lot better with its overall shape and size. But it was still pretty average with the paper mache amount of material, and I added a couple of guides with just regular paper. I think it turned out okay for the first time, but after a while the tape was starting to show and like bundle up over the paper mache, so I had to add more to cover that. So I basically ended up putting a couple more layers over it with the I don't know, whatever technique that you want to use for putting paper mache, and just added it everywhere until I got some kind of good thickness so that it wouldn't just bend on itself and it was a little bit flexible. If you guys don't know what paper mache is, it's basically taking glue, putting it in water, and taking newspaper strips, cloth, or paper, dipping it and placing it on a surface. After a while, it'll dry off and you'll have your own little manufactured layer of a gluey sticky surface, which is pretty cool. So once I have the entire shape done, covered out of paper mache, it looked really cool, just inspecting it around and seeing that there were no cracks or areas that were still missing something. Alright. So then my next step was Mod Podge. I don't know if you guys saw my previous video, but it's a type of sealant that it'll protect the surface from getting any kind of scratches, and it gives it like a nice glossy look. So I covered both sides of the mask, inside and outside, because I didn't want any kind of dirt to get into it or scrape it or mess up the the paper mache. And it turned out okay. You do have to be careful with the amount that you put on, because for myself, I made sure that everywhere had around the same amount of newspaper, and there wasn't areas where there was like only one sheet where a couple drops of water could poke a hole through it. So before you put on that layer of Mod Podge, you should be really careful about how much or how thick your overall mask is throughout that area. And then that turned out pretty well afterwards, because I wanted to add some decals on it and give it some more dimensions. So what I did was I got some, basically looking, I got some ideas just looking at pictures online with the different shapes that some people will put on the Acolyte helmets, and I chose to go with some kind of angular shape. My own design, to mix between other versions, and the end product is pretty cool, but you'll get to that later. So I cut out different pieces of whatever types of shapes, but I basically started with the front, the top part. I had some kind of M or V intersection with one big strap going up the rest of the head, and that kind of started as that kind of served as like my big frame or something. I'm not even sure what to call it. In order to find out how to do the smaller decorations or dimensions on it, I had to decide what type of material I was going to use. I was thinking about using more cardboard, but I would have to cut the pieces individually and in the exact same shapes that I wanted them to. Cardboard doesn't really bend as freely as, say, Twizzler. I guess there's some analogy there. But with the cardboard, it's very rigid and solid. It's good stuff, but when you glue it onto a surface, it's not like you're going to be able to bend it everywhere you want, especially with pieces that small. So I kind of thought that using foam would be a better substitute because of its flexibility, and I could cut it into like whatever kind I wanted without having to worry about, oh boy, is this going to like break? Is it going to snap off? It's actually relatively strong. The foam that I used, you could probably get at Joann Fabrics or any kind of arts and crafts store. It's just thin. It's like a mushy stuff that they make some kind of, like they make some props with it, like toys. And I used that to cover the entire surface area. It turned out okay. Got all the different pieces that I had to cut out on it, and I was able to get the entire angular features and the shape all around, and no complications there. Just had to make sure that all the pieces were up to scale and they were symmetrical on either side. That was probably the hardest part for me, since I had to put them all on there by hand. It could have been a little bit easier, but I didn't know if there was a different type of technique to do that. So I glued all those pieces on there, made sure that they were all fit and had my own design, and then I put some tape on any areas that were not completely sticking to the surface of the Mod Podge. Thinking about it now, I might have probably should have put the layer of Mod Podge after the miniature dimension foam pieces, so that the glue would have an easier time sticking and faster, but I guess that's for next time. So I taped over any little cracks that would have shown, and I made it ready for like the second layer of the covering of the Mod Podge. Tape in the cracks where it was supposed to be smooth. I added one more foam piece of one more big foam piece to cover that big section on the dome, and a couple pieces for the nose. I made a rim around each eye so that it could have like a cooler look, and there wouldn't be any kinds of things sticking out when you're looking through it, and a couple side burn protections and some bigger chin pieces. And when I had all that done, I basically put my second layer on. The final product looked pretty cool, I would say. Not a lot of Not a lot of cracks, not a lot of like deformations, and it did look overall pretty darn cool. Especially the similarity to the mask from the video game, and because it was made out of paper mache, which I thought was pretty cool. Now, I didn't stop here because I wasn't really pleased with. Well, I was incredibly pleased with the detail that I had, and it was a really good shape and a finish. And all that I would have needed to do was, well, all that you'd need to do is paint over it if you wanted to make that your final design. Just paint whatever areas that you want, whether you want to do like a multi-color thing. So you could start with a layer of spray paint. You could make that gray, and then you could hand paint the inside areas with black. However best that you wanted, and that would be your final design. But I actually wanted to make mine out of plastic, using that as the shape. I'll explain what I did there with my second tutorial, part 2 of this video. But if you're comfortable with making a Sith Acolyte mask out of paper mache, this is for you. This took about, I would say 50 hours with all the paper mache that had to be put on, and the shapes that you need to do, and different cuts, the different dimensions. But overall, the product is going to look really nice. One thing I would like to stress is you really should sand it down if it's got bumps everywhere. If you want it to be really smooth, then don't be afraid to sand over the glue areas. You could just cover it up again with another layer of glue and make it nice and smooth. So, thanks for watching this video, and if you guys want to know how I made this out of plastic, then stay tuned for part 2. So until next time, thanks for watching my video, and please subscribe.